Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Purdy Insurance. Visit Purdy Insurance on Market Street in Sunbury or visit online at purdyinsurance.com.
Time now for another edition of Tuesdays with Neal. That means, Mr. Coolong, welcome.
You bet. As always, it is great to be here. I hope your weekend went well.
Yeah, it did. How about you?
Good. It was good. Back. You know, we didn't really do a whole lot, but the weather was great. So, opportunity to get outside a little bit, kind of walk around the community, hang out, and grill up some food. That's the extent of the fun things that I do. I don't know about you. I'm kind of lame.
Big thing for me was doing as much with my kids as possible. We went out, just spending time. It was great. Loved it. So, Jeff Van Gundy, NBA analyst, former NBA head coach, is not the first broadcaster, obviously, to look at social media and say, really? Are you kidding me? And the topic was brought up because of Victor Wembanyama, who everyone says is a generational talent. But he says, right now, he says social media is a real problem. How do you view social media in the NFL context as to what you think it does and does not mean?
It's funny you bring that up. I was literally just looking at quotes from USC quarterback Caleb Williams. It seems as if there is a dire push to put him in the same stratosphere as Wembanyama right now. Choosing my words carefully, but mainly there allegedly is a scout that compared him to Patrick Mahomes. It's like, well, if a scout is out there that said there's a comparison between him and Patrick Mahomes, I don't know what else the scout said, but I'm not sure how relevant that really is or what it could be. And if anything, you see the proliferation of such content opportunity spread very quickly through social media, regardless of the validity of it. And in this case, I think you can get a player entering the NFL with a certain level of hype that isn't earned in any way. Now, you look at the NBA, you understand that you know, in the era in which they've been able to, you know, draft high school seniors to college freshmen, it's all hype. You know, you're not really seeing a whole lot of polish in that. That's not something the NFL necessarily has. At the very least, they've probably played a pretty good amount by the time they're draft eligible. We're seeing that become less and less, though. I mean, Caleb Williams is a phenomenal talent. I love watching him play, but they want to hype up, in the NFL world at least. Social media has risen since Andrew Luck, for example. Everyone has to become the next Luck, whoever it is that comes out. That stays with the player. If anything, I'd say that it makes it probably more negative. You know, look at Jadeveon Clowney. That's a player that you put any other level of hype around him, and a huge amount of that is social media fueled. He has a pretty nice career, but because of the monster that he was leading into his NFL career, you have a certain level of expectation that nobody on earth would have ever reached. And I think that expectation, fair or otherwise, exists because in social media what you get is one person who may not have any clue what they're talking about or have any reason to be saying it wants to one-up the hype from the last person that said it. So the prospect is built up to be, fair or otherwise, something well above and beyond who they really are, or even what, you know, we've come to kind of expect from what a rookie should look like within the NFL. I think that's probably going to be Caleb Williams. I think you're going to hear accolades that are created specifically for him throughout this coming college season, and it's because of, I have to say something big to get noticed in social media. And now that Caleb Williams is the next Andrew Luck in terms of prospect, everyone's going to have to one-up that benchmark, and they'll continue to do it more and more. So to the point where an alleged NFL scout compares him to Patrick Mahomes. And frankly, I don't think there is any comparison between those two at all. He doesn't play like Patrick Mahomes at all. It's not a valid comparison. But it has hype, and that's what's going to get whoever it is that came up with that notice. That's really what they look for.
You work around and with a lot of young people. You and I have talked about it both on and off the air, and what we talk about off the air is nobody's business but ours. But when working with young people, how influenced are they by social media, whether it is Twitter, Instagram, or a message board, whatever it may be, as to how it calibrates their thinking? A lot, a little, or some?
I think a lot. And I say that because there's a subdivision in that. I think people can glean the right information found within social media. There's plenty of it, though, negative stuff or stuff that's not coming from a place of intellectual quality, that they find it because they looked in social media, not adding. Social media, like anything, can be a tool you use to develop an opinion on something. You're able to draw a wide range of opinions from it on there, but you can readily find well-known opinion makers, people that are making their opinions for themselves. What you're looking at usually is junk social media accounts or non-opinion makers quoting somebody else anonymously with certain evaluations of certain players. I don't think young people in the business that I'm in aren't drawing enough from that to create an article on it. They're not using it as a reference point, but there's no way that they're not absorbing it to some degree. There's just an insane amount of chatter around so many different topics. It can be difficult to tune it out. I put it directly on the user to determine whether or not something is realistic, depending on who the name is that you're reading, who's sharing that information. You can get a pretty good sense of how realistic something is. But even if you are going through the process to disqualify that, it's still in your head that this is worth determining whether this player is worth this or that or the other thing. I think young people are savvy enough in using such tools that they know they have to go through that kind of a process. What they don't have necessarily is the background in the discipline itself to make a decision. If you are a historian, if you are a scout, if you know to a high degree how the quarterback position is played, what to look for, you have enough to make a reasonable opinion on Caleb Williams. At the same time, if you have that and you hear somebody compare him to Patrick Mahomes, you should feel confident in saying, I don't care what their job is, that comparison is ridiculous. It's just not valid at all. Young people can tell one from the other, but it's almost as if there's always an expected battle that comes up in terms of, when I say young people, I mean within this industry.
Right.
Many will kind of buy into the hype that they're being fed from social media, but the best ones are ones that are not trying to add to it, but more explain why it exists or to validate it through their own work. Everyone can be excited about somebody, and you can agree or disagree with that. Finding that reasonable opinion, though, is really what the game is now. You have to be able to weigh in on something unique and original, or just something that's out there that's trending. You need to be able to provide good context as to what you're seeing, why you're seeing it, and why people might feel a certain way about it.
Yeah, because I think anybody having an opinion, I respect it. I want to hear it. But I always take a lot of it with a grain of salt, depending on who's saying it, especially if it's somebody who's doing it anonymously. Because I am from the school that a little knowledge is not complete knowledge, or a little knowledge is really dangerous. And that's how I view it.
Agree with that. Yeah, I mean, it's people who don't know anything have less of a time believing that they don't now than they did 30 years ago, in my opinion. The art of amateur scouting has exploded in the United States throughout the tenure of social media. It's one of the best mediums for the delivery of crappy amateur analysis. And there are a lot of people that don't understand what they're looking at that will weigh in on something because they think it's something else. At the same time, though, it does give you ample exposure to a lot of people who really do have a good idea of what they're talking about. Those are the people that I've learned from. There are too many of them to mention, but it's kind of part and parcel of the same thing, though. If you know what you're looking for and you know what you're looking at, you can see what's real and what isn't. And that, I think, is the real challenge, especially when it comes to football. There are a lot of people that think that they can scout the game, that they can evaluate the game. The best people that I've been around that really understand the game, how it's played, what to look for, and things like that, are people who tend to say, I don't know anything compared to the people that taught me. And those are usually, much higher up people. The people in the football circles tend to be ones that, well, I sat and watched, 14 hours of film of this guy, and I broke him down. Like, I can watch Shawshank Redemption 6 million times. That doesn't mean that I know what an excellent movie is. You need to know what you're looking at, and I think what gets lost in the rush to be first on social media, to be popular in social media, is that level of quality. And sometimes an answer can be very complicated when it comes to the quality of a football player and why. That doesn't necessarily pertain, or it doesn't play itself well to 280 characters on Twitter. You might need to provide a little bit more, explanation than that. Some people take well to that. Other people go the opposite route. They need 19 tweets to tell you something that's very basic and very simple. They can't boil it down into one, cogent thought. But overall, what we see probably more than anything is the value of a player rises and falls in a very consistent pattern. And we see that leading into the draft all the time. We talked about Hendon Hooker, I don't know how many times leading into the draft. Hendon Hooker was drafted pretty much exactly where I thought that he would be drafted. But he was undrafted, according to social media, and undraftable in social media in January, and then he was a first-round pick in the 2 weeks leading up to the draft. Nobody I talked to said really anything different about Hooker. Probably a round 2, round 3 guy. That's most likely where he's going to end up. That's exactly what happened. It was the most reasonable opinion from the people that know it the best, but people want to get into the arms race of, well, I called it. I said he was going to be taken here, and that kind of waxes and wanes throughout the life cycle of the draft. And we'll see that again and again with prospects all the time. Players that scouts have pegged already. They know probably where they're going to be drafted. Teams know kind of what they're looking at. You go through everything, but their stock doesn't rise and fall. It kind of is what it is. There are a lot of people that don't really take that into account, that don't understand that. And it's because they don't see it from a team perspective. They see it from their own, and they probably don't know what they're looking at, though.
Well, this is something, and I'm going to repeat myself to the audience. I probably have said this to you as well. I will freely tell everybody on this show or a pregame show that as much as I think I know about football, James Franklin knows exponentially more than I do about it. and so do all of his coaches. As much as I know about basketball, and I broadcast basketball, I'm going in my 42nd season, Mike Rhodes knows exponentially more about basketball as the head coach of Penn State than I know. Right? And these are the people I take cues from as to helping me to get a better informed opinion, because I think one of the important elements of opinion is the ability to listen to people who know what they're talking about. Jack Ham knows more about it than I do. Okay? So I listen to what Jack has to say, and that's how I form my opinion, as opposed to somebody said online. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I'll read it because I respect, this is the paying public, and the paying public should always be listened to. But in terms of forming my opinion, it doesn't change my opinion much, because I've got a better informed opinion that I can ask a question of and get a better answer. How about that?
That's really it. I think that's everything. It's knowing only so many opinions. There are only so many conclusions that you can reach. Take whatever player. Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah.
The outcome of his career, only so many different ways we can say what it would be, what our prediction is. There are myriad ways to get to one of those conclusions. The skill is not throwing the dart at the board and picking out which one of the very limited number of outcomes there are available, and then acting afterwards as if you knew everything that was going to happen the whole time. Why will this happen? What is it about him now that needs to get better to reach the best outcome? Those are the questions that people that know can weigh in on intelligently. I'm sure Jack Ham can give you a very reasonable opinion of why he feels Joey Porter is this or that or the other thing. Doesn't mean that he's going to be right or wrong, because at the end of the day, whatever it is that he says today means nothing compared to what is going to happen within that young man's life over the next 3 years. That's what's going to shape him into a player. You don't know. You just simply don't know. Approaching analysis, evaluation with that in mind tends to land you in a more, I don't want to say a humble evaluation, but a more realistic evaluation. When you look at what makes a good player in the NFL, this or that, so much of that is on him and how he develops with the information as he's getting it. It's all, that changes him as a person. You don't know that where we sit today. And whatever it is that he's going to be in 2 years has nothing to do with what we say today. The best people are aware of that. They are just simply breaking down who he is as a player, who he is as an athlete, who he is as a person, and putting all of those things together to give you a reasonable idea of what he will look like in the defense that you want him to play in. And from there, kind of project out who he might be and what value that is to your team. That determines the round that you would take a player in. There's a bigger bucket that you look at that says he has all of these things that matches up with a first or a second round pick. So among the candidates of this, when we're on the clock, these are the players that we're looking to draft because they fit this round bucket, and that's what we want. Going through that process is what brings out, in my opinion anyway, why a team makes the pick that they make and what the expectation is for that player. That isn't something that has to be agreed upon for everybody. Just because you don't like this player in this round, it doesn't mean anything, really, because the team in this case feels that that's the exact set of what they're looking at. You aren't looking at the same pieces of information. And I agree with you, and I say it all the time. I've been in rooms with high-level NFL people talking X's and O's football, and they may as well have been speaking a completely different language. I have no idea what they're saying a lot of the time. Keeping up with the pace of it, the amount of knowledge that they're able to display in a very short amount of time, it's dizzying. And then you look at the fact that these people are being paid high six figures, if not seven figures, to make these decisions, and it still doesn't work out well in every single situation.
Right.
There's a level of kind of hopelessness that comes with it. It's like, you almost may as well throw a dartboard. You really don't know. It's a very complex thing, and making it simple is the art. And the best ones, I think, understand the information comes through the process, not through their opinion. And working within a team, working within that structure is what makes good decisions. And knowing, too, they're not always going to work out. No matter what you do, no matter how much sense it makes, it won't always work out because there are just too many variables that you don't control over a very long period of time.
I mean, that's the part I tell everybody all the time. I said, it doesn't mean they're going to be right about every decision. That's not the point here. But they have the best chance of making the decision because they have more information all the way around as to what they think is the best thing to try. And that's what I think sometimes some people, not a lot, but some people don't get.
I think the simplest way to put it is their educated guess is vastly superior to your educated guess.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're both guesses. It's just one group in this scenario understands far better the entire process than the other one does.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to be right 100% of the time. So acting as if you being right one time matters, it's irrelevant.
As usual, Neal and I script this out. We just go.
The theoretical. That's where it's at. You know, I think we're in eagle-eye view of foremost experts and the complete idiots, where we can fit well in between those two spots.
Exactly. It's what we do. Neal, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.